Okay, moving on with our program presentations, I'd like to introduce our Associate Director for Clinical Research, Dr. Antoinette Wozniak.
Thanks, Bob. My name is Antoinette Wozniak. I am the Associate Director for Clinical Research, and I'm happy to be here today to discuss Hillman Cancer Center research. I was recruited from the Karmanos Cancer Institute a little over a year ago, and I serve as the Medical Director of Clinical Research Services and my goal is to establish the vision and strategic planning for all clinical research. Dr. Banu Papu was recruited from MD Anderson about 2 years ago to serve as Associate Director for Clinical Research Operations, and he oversees day-to-day operations at CPDM. And we work extremely closely together. Both of us have a great deal of experience in clinical research in all aspects. This represents the clinical research services here. There are 187 FTEs in the service, and the institutional commitment was $4.2 million in 2018. In 2015, our score was outstanding. Some of the critiques included accrual to clinical trials, number of IITs and external peer-reviewed trials, minority accrual enhancement, the makeup and process of some of our committees, and time to trial activation and the integration of pediatrics. Since that time period, we've restructured the clinical leadership and operations. There are 12 new faculty involved in clinical research, 12 in total that were hired in the last couple of years. We have a great deal of engagement of the community oncologists and have increased accruals in the community from 8.6% to 20% in 2018. And we have many strategies we've employed to enhance minority accrual. The time to trial activation has been decreased by 19% overall, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. And we've streamlined the processes of our committee, auditing and QA, and integrated pediatric oncology. This is a list of the CPDM functions, and they are, as you would expect for this function, for these functions. The CPDM is also involved in auditing, both internal and external, and responses to these audits, quality assurance, and reporting deviations as needed. The CPDM supports 16 disease modality centers, and you see them listed here along with the medical directors and the CPDM leads. CPDM facilitates trial development. It starts with the principal investigator in the disease center where a decision is made to develop and prioritize a trial. After this, the trial is sent to the PRC where it is reviewed. Also, budget contracts, fiscal review, and IRB review occur. And this is actually a parallel process. The reviews are expedited for NCTN and ETCTN trials and external peer-reviewed trials. And you can see the breakdown of the activation times for each process. And we recognize that with regard to contracts, we still have some work to do. The average time to trial activation has been decreased overall by 19%. And this actually is a breakdown of the types of trials and how much we've improved. So you have a dot plot in 2015 and one in 2019. And basically you can see that the dots are a little closer together. So we've eliminated some of the outliers with our efforts. The greatest decrease in time to trial activation has been for national trials and external peer-reviewed trials. And overall, the decrease is 19% to 141 days. Some of the steps to reduce trial activation have occurred. In July of 2017, there was a new task force that was established. And this works more closely with UPMC and the Pitt Office of Research to identify potential obstacles. The parallel process for regulatory review and contracts we have been doing. There's pre-approved master industrial contract and consent forms with various sponsors. New insurance riders have occurred for high-risk IITs IITs and a new data safety monitoring plan for interinstitutional collaborative IITs. And the other thing we have is real-time tracking of the trials through our CTMS system, which is CTMA. And we're able to actually get alerts when a trial is held up and try to actually get to those alerts and figure out what's going on so we can get the trial through in a faster period of time. This represents our network, and you've seen this slide before, and the makeup of the network. Actually, almost half of the counties have a Hillman Cancer Center presence, and we have accruals from all 29 counties. In 2018, we had 1,360 accruals, 1,843 accruals to interventional trials, and of note, 74% of them were to institutional and external peer-reviewed trials, and 20% came from the community. And this represents the accrual since 2015. We had a dip in accrual for a little while, and there's an explanation for that. We had some senior physicians leave to go to leadership positions at other institutions. So with the new physicians, and it takes a little while to get the trials going, we've also had a lot of initiatives in the community, and that's resulted in a nearly 40% increase in treatment accruals for 2019. Those numbers are annualized. They represent annualized from the data from January 1st to November 30th. So our clinical trial accrual in terms of African Americans and women is fairly consistent with what we have in the catchment area. The multiple steps to increase accrual, there are many that have occurred. We've tried to open more trials that are supported through the externally peer-reviewed mechanism of the NCTN and the UM1 and the ETCTN phase 1 and 2 trials. Some of the efforts in the community sites include the identification of trials that are user-friendly for the community, both by the disease centers and physician champions for particular tumor types within the community. We have a clinical trials app I'll show you shortly that we launched just in October, and we are trying to introduce more of the externally peer-reviewed supportive care trials in the community. We are also trying to develop trials that work well in the community. We just opened a trial looking at length of PD-1, PD-L1 treatment that is going to be available that is available in all sites in the community, and we hope to answer a very important question. And the community physicians are very excited about that, and we already have some accrual. So this is the app. So the app actually is very intuitive. It can be customized. It will be available to patients fairly soon as well. And you can actually page CPDM staff on the spot and have them come down and help you recruit a patient to a trial. And hopefully we'll have some data around the first of the year. We've done, there have been a number of steps to increase minority accrual. There's a minority task force that's co-chaired by myself and Dr. Robertson. We have hired dedicated navigators and a research coordinator that are hired and trained by CRS. And we have a lot of collaboration with the community. Actually, some of our efforts have resulted in an increase in some of our accruals in the NCTN trials. We've actually gone up from 5 to 10% with our minority accruals. In terms of pediatric oncology, they are fully integrated into CPDM. The protocols are reviewed by PRC, accruals are captured, and the pediatric oncologists have membership on the important committees within the CRS. And they have scientific integration as well. Examples of this are collaborations with sarcoma research and the phase 1 program. Our future goals are obviously to increase accrual to our trials, and that's through increasing our NCTN trials. We're trying to develop relationship with pharma to get access to new treatments. Our ultimate goal is to decrease trial activation to 90 days. We think that by the end of 2020, we can at least get down to 120 days, and we're going to continue to try to develop strategies to increase accrual from minorities and from the community. PRMS, the decision to develop a trial starts in the disease center, and that's the Tier 1 review. Once it's decided to move forward with a trial, it is sent to the PRC for review of scientific merit and prioritization. Once the trial is open, then the PRC is involved in reviewing the trials for progress with regard to accrual and continued scientific merit. The PRC reviews multiple data sources and can suspend or close a trial for lack of progress or for safety or other reasons as well, and it does submit final decisions to the appropriate committees. The PRC committees, there are 2 main committees. They meet every month so that one committee meets every 2 weeks, and they have wide representation from multiple areas, and they are led by 2 experienced clinical researchers. We also have the option of ad hoc reviewers for translational studies as well. Committee C actually reviews biobehavioral trials on an ad hoc basis. In terms of the Tier 1 process, the disease center protocol review, this is an example of 7 of our disease centers and the number of trials they reviewed this past year and their rejection rate. And the rejection rate on the average is close to 40% before it even gets to PRC. The PRMS review summary, this is for prior to 2019, and in 2019, the number of protocols reviewed are about 160 per year. You can see the distribution with regard to the types of trials. Most of them are approved, but about 24% are sent back for revisions. And over 400 trials were monitored in 2019 for accrual and for scientific merit. In terms of our review, trials are looked at for accrual at least every 6 months. Low accrual trials in rare tumors or rare subtypes are evaluated yearly for accrual. In 2019, there were 49 such trials that were identified, and 2 were closed by the PI, 11 by PRC, and 10 trials were closed for other variety of reasons. And 26 were able to increase their accrual in order to stay active. So our future goal, our continue rigorous review of our protocols. We want to hit that magic number of less than 90 days in terms of time to trial activation, and we are going to continue to monitor protocols carefully for accrual and scientific merit. And finally, I will speak about the DSMB and the DSMC. Our plan for data safety monitoring was reviewed by the NCI and approved in July of 2019. This, again, is a 2-tiered system. Within each disease and modality center, the DSMB reviews toxicities and adverse events and then reports them. Each disease modality center meets at least monthly to do this, but some of the modality centers meet a little more frequently. For instance, phase 1 meets on a weekly basis. This is then reported to the DSMC, which meets monthly, and they review all the DSMB minutes, SAEs, protocol deviations. They can make a decision to recommend to the PRC closure or suspension of a trial, and they notify the PI and take any other corrective actions. In 2019, you can see the number of trials that were reviewed. All interventional trials, about 230 were reviewed. Almost 500 SAEs were also reviewed, and 46 corrective actions were suggested. And 2 trials were either closed or suspended for safety reasons during this past year. and I'll take any questions.
I believe we had a chance to ask most of the questions in our breakout session.
Okay. I actually had two, if no one
Okay.
else does. So I just want to make sure the numbers are consistent. For African Americans, on one slide, you say it's 6.4% in the catchment area, and on another, in the table, you listed as 4.8%.
I think that was the accrual number. Let me go back and look.
Well, that's but
Huh?
it's at the
Cancer incidence, I'm sorry.
incidence.
Let's see. I'll go back here, take a look. Oop. No.
This one says 4.8%.
That's the incidence, yeah, in the cases. That's the incidence in the Western Pennsylvania catchment area, and then at the, this is the central area, I think, the 5.8%, right? Yeah, okay. And the participants, it's about 5%. It's been about that.
Okay, so the cancer incidence in African Americans is lower than the population percentage.
Yes.
Okay, and on the slide that's just before this, we raised this with Bob again, with the interventional accruals. It actually dropped every year until this past year. Number
Yes.
one, I want to make sure we're in December now. Is that 2019 projection on target? Is that going to be the way it looks when you have to show them the updated data next month?
I didn't hear it.
I understand that. I just want to make sure that now in mid-December, that's the way it is
Yes.
like that.
So far, up until November 30th, yes.
So you had said that community accruals between 2015 and 2018 increased from 8% to 20% of the
yes.
total. That means that your primary sites, the accrual dropped even more if the community accruals are in these numbers? Is that a correct interpretation?
Well, I think accrual overall improved. So they have a 20% portion of it, but I think our, overall.
Well, it dropped every year until this past year. So I'm just.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And so is the big increase this year because of community sites or network sites? I just want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples so that you don't get in trouble. Because if they find that you're counting differently, that's the worst thing that can happen at a site visit.
And where are they, in all those community sites, the analytic cases are counted?
Yeah,
For the
I'm going to let
denominator?
Dr.
Yes. So we count the analytical cases even in the community sites where we are doing the research. And the increase that you see in 2019, we opened a few IITs that are accruing very well in the community because we did the retreat and we found out what type of trials they need. So in 2018 and 2019, we opened some specific trials that really accrued quite a few patients in the community.
So the increase is in the community then?
Both community and this one, so it is not, so we are not exclusively favoring community versus central sites. So the increase is across the board, but in the community, it is much higher than the central sites.
And
If
you're
you see the
counting the
proportion.
community in your denominator for the percentage of patients that go on trials?
We can provide that number. We can calculate that.
Actually, that's one of the things that we talked about in the breakout session to make it clear up front that this includes both the center and the community, which of course in many places doesn't.
But I am concerned if the center itself has decreasing numbers, or if that big increase in 2019 is in the community, you're going to need to be able to explain that if that's the case. It's great to have increasing accrual in the community, but it'd be worrisome if it's also decreasing.
We'll have those numbers available.
I wonder, you could also have another chart with splitting out community participation and central participation, if that helped you.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, you say you have accrual from all 29 counties, but it looks like a lot of your clinical sites are in southwestern Pennsylvania. Can you talk a little bit about what happens in north central Pennsylvania? And yeah, are there active things going on there to get those patients?
So we have accruals from 29 counties and interventional accruals from 28 of 29. And one county that did not accrue any intervention is like Forest County, that has about 600 people or something. So as far as the recruitment from the Northwest or Northeast Pennsylvania, they usually come down to I think every Hillman site is like no more than 1.5 hour driving distance. So they tend to come to the closest Hillman sites where we have research available.
But I guess I'm asking, do you have data about what the like the proportion of cancers are those counties in the catchment area? Are you accruing at a rate that's proportional to the number of cancers there?
So we have the data, but obviously the proportionate of accruals obviously is going to favor the urban counties compared to rural counties, but it is definitely happening, but we can definitely increase compared to what we are doing today.
Just be ready for that, because there's a big blank up there and it doesn't look like you've done much, but maybe you have.
I didn't see, what proportion of your patients overall go on trials?
Which trials?
What proportion of your patients overall go on trials? You said that 5% are minorities, but
Approximately 10%.
approximately 10%. Yeah,
Therapeutic.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, so 10% of total patients go on trials,
Therapeutic.
trials, and 5% of minorities go on therapeutic trials.
Yes.
Okay, so there's room for improvement there.
Yes.
Okay.
We've actually, like I said, increased the accruals on the
5% of the accrual.
National Alliance trials. That has gone up.
Yeah.
It's low.
Yes.
Where are those numbers?
So the navigator and the research coordinators that we hired through our minority, to try to increase minority accruals, are actually stationed at the sites where we have a larger African-American population.
Could we go to the next slide? So that 5% on the bottom, is that 5% of African-American patients, or is that 5% of people on trials? Do you understand?
Yes.
Which is it?
That's 5% of people on trials
Right,
are
yep.
African American.
Okay.
And what is the catchment area
So that's doesn't say that.
population?
About the same, right?
This is this is the whole area.
6.4 is the catchment area, African American.
Got it.
And for all of these, you're consistent, whether you're counting everyone in including community sites for all these numbers, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I see from the top line. Right, so it might be useful to have that calculation done. Okay.
Different question. That's got something else. Yeah, I just wondered if you could speak to the DMCs. By the way, call them what you call them in the grant. But DMCs, how does it work in terms of ensuring continuity if they're also functioning as a stage 1 DSMB?
Well, we do take minutes. We have a list of all the SAEs that we go through. We just did it in the thoracic group, which I'm part of the other day. And they're all submitted to the DSMC and reviewed there as well. So, we are very careful about taking minutes about what we do and about all the SAEs that we review.
In each of the groups has the same infrastructure and support for that function?
Yes, yes.
So one concern with the numbers here, you say that, the interventional accruals, patients in cancer registry in 2017, but interventional accruals in 2018.
It's a year behind. It's usually a year behind in terms of our index cases.
All right.
But you should have the 18 numbers, right? Because we're all the way at 19, end of 19.
We should.
So, yeah,
Yep.
we should have some time very soon.
So I kind of went back through, so there's not a place in any of the presentations where someone describes the demographics altogether of this catchment area. So what's the demographic? How many walk through the door at any Hillman site? And then how many of those that walk through the door go on an interventional trial at any Hillman site? Race, all that. Is that anywhere?
In the write-up,
Right, but not in the presentation. No one will really summarize or address that. But you put the onus on the reviewer to do all the work, and they may actually turn that to the people at the podium. And it's up to you whether you want to start doing all the math at the podium or provide it.
You don't, trust me.
I just think, give it to them in a nice tabular form and tell them this is what it is and here's what we're meeting, or here's where we're not meeting it and here's our plan. Just because I think all the questions we had is because it really wasn't laid out. But maybe you
I mean,
it puts the onus on the people at the podium to keep far more of the details right on the tip of their tongue.
it also may help
Backup slide.
remind people that, you don't
Yeah.
have other minorities
I
in
can
these
have a
large
backup
numbers, and
slide.
African Americans are like the one, because that's what you keep
Yeah.
presenting, and there's a reason for that, but they may somehow ask where are the Asians and Hispanics, and you can, if you say up front, it's less than 1% of our population or something, that gets that out of the way. A little bit, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I think
Right, right.
Hispanics is less than 2%. We do have that up there.
Right.
But I can have a backup slide of the other demographics if we get asked.
Mm-hmm. And so what is the percentage of your rural population that is accrued to an interventional trial?
I don't know.
So
And
again,
we have that information.
right, but if
I don't have it.
you had it on one slide,
don't have it
all
right.
of this, you
Okay.
wouldn't even have to present it per se or just highlight a few areas. You won't be on the spot to answer it.
Okay.
And you might want to have it by county, just in case.
We have that actually.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
You probably answered this already, and I'm sorry if I'm just asking it again. The cancer registry patient numbers, that's for the whole system?
Yes.
So 11,000 and some is the whole system.
So,
So the 11,000 is,
The catchment area. Yeah.
But I think if one of your slides said over 90% of your patients come from the catchment area, so that's a close number.
I mean, for example, Hillman system includes Harrisburg Hospital, Pinnacle system. That is part of UPMC system, but it's not in our catchment area. So there are some variations like that. But the number that we showed is from 29 counties.
But it'd be less than 10%. I think Bob's slide said 90% come from the catchment.
This is the top line there, 93%.
Yeah, 93%.
And do 50% of your cases come from rural areas? I know you just were sort of asked that, but half of your cases, your trial participants come from rural areas? That's what the
20%, about 20%, no, about 20% roughly, 25%.
So that's a problem, right? I mean, it says you're underserving the rural population? That's a question.
There's less patients, there's less cases. Yeah.
But if there's 30, how many percent of cases is versus how many? Because earlier on, it was something like 5% of cases, or 5% of people went on trials, and 36% of people, cancer cases, came from those same places. I think earlier on in your early table, you said something like 3 to 5% were rural populations on trials, and 36% of your population coming to you were rural residents. Anyway, it seemed like a disparity, but check it.
So who owns the action plan? I mean, in terms of this, where is it going to appear? Like, it appears here in the grant, but the specific things to focus on, what's going on for rural populations and minority populations and so forth.
We'll have those numbers.
This is Tim Everline. You know, you also want to talk about continuum of care. So you haven't mentioned pediatric and you haven't mentioned elderly patients, et cetera. This would probably be the part of the presentation that you'd want to include those numbers.
What was the question? Oh, and the elderly, yeah. We actually discussed that at our meeting just before this.